Would you please welcome to the stage Dave Luck? Great. So, Dave, welcome.
Thank you.
And you're not new to the gathering. You've been before. Was in the quagmire of 2 years ago.
Yeah, I came 2 years ago. I think we all needed Survivor t-shirts for that. But it was good.
Now, take us back to the start of 2010. What is life like for you?
So actually in 2010, I would say life was as good as it had ever been. So I'm working for the council. I've got a really good job. I've also taken on shared leadership of my local church. And I've got a family, and that's really important to me because family was difficult growing up. So I've got a wife and I've got 2 kids. And it's not that everything is perfectly straightforward, but things are as together as they've ever been.
Cool. Okay. So you'd grown up in a family. You weren't necessarily a Christian family. You grew up in, but your mum became a Christian, and
That's
then
right.
you started going to church, and then at some point you became a Christian. And fine. Okay. So now you are. You've gone into church leadership as well as holding down a full-time job. So then a little bit later, come June, what happens?
Okay, so my youngest son, Ben, started to get poorly. Things initially that seemed quite innocuous, back and forth to doctors. And a few weeks in, my wife took him back to the Children's Hospital, didn't really know what to do. And they did a scan and they found out that he'd got a 5-centimeter brain tumor out the front of his brain.
Okay, so parents' worst nightmare.
Yeah.
So what were here you are, you're a Christian, you're in leadership, and so what's your thoughts, what's your expectations, how do you deal with it?
So obviously the bottom falls out of your world, you're in shock, but you listen to the doctors, you do what they say, and immediately we got people praying. So I sent out a really quick email and just sort of generated energy, so soon there were churches praying. We had a Facebook page, and our approach was, like I say, we'll go with the doctors, but we'll pray. And I had an expectation that he would be healed.
Okay, right. So what happens? He has surgery?
Yep, so 3 days after the diagnosis, he has a full day's brain surgery, which we warned he might not wake up from. And that goes really well. Then he's into chemotherapy and radiotherapy. And we have people praying through every stage, and at every stage where we face a battle, we seem to be overcoming that. About 6 months into the treatment, he has high-dose chemotherapy, which is dangerous because it wipes out your immune system. And what happens is he gets a bug, and the bug got onto his lungs and he got pneumonia.
So at this stage, the treatment seems to be working well?
Yeah, initially we seem to be having some progress.
Okay, all right. And so you say he gets pneumonia?
Yeah, he got pneumonia, and we essentially had a day of being told he's not likely to survive this. And full day, just hanging on, right on the edge, people praying. And we're watching a kind of computer monitor, and it's got a thing called his oxygen saturation rate, which needs to be in the 90s. And really struggling to maintain that. They said if this goes down into the 60s and the 70s, he won't survive. And it went down into the 60s, and I was pretty much waiting to be told, we're done. I got a couple of guys in the room praying, and the numbers just leapt up. And then the numbers were in the 90s. And I never got a medical explanation. They didn't have one.
Okay, so there seems to be some kind of improvement happening there.
Yep.
But a scan can't be done.
No, so he comes through that, which is being thought of as a miracle in the hospital. They don't get it. But he's very, very weak, so we don't know what's going on with the cancer.
Yeah.
And they can't scan him for a couple of months because of how weak he is. And so they do that early in 2011, and we get called in to see the consultant, and the consultant says, there is something on the scan. And that's them saying to us, there's nothing we can do.
That literally have gone through every bit of treatment.
Yeah, he's had everything.
Okay. And the end is not good.
No, so we keep praying. We keep praying because there is nothing else. Medicine's done. And anywhere we can think to take them to pray, anyone who can come to us. We had an African Pentecostal bishop come to the house. But at the end of April, we took him to a hospice outside Sheffield, and we lost him at the end of April 2011.
Okay. Age 5?
He was 6.
6 then, okay. So, you, at the start of this process, like I said, you were a church leader, you are a Christian, and all your prayers, what you were hoping for didn't materialize. What does that leave you? How are you then feeling? What's going on?
I kind of had no frame of reference, so I felt like my theology had broken. And I actually had a picture partway through the process where it was like I was holding a box with a globe in it, which seemed to represent my life, and the bottom of the box gave way, and the globe came through and it smashed. And I felt like that represented my life. I didn't get it anymore. I still had a belief in God, but I didn't really know how to do anything. I was just kind of in shock, really.
Okay, so did you keep going to church?
So I'd been leading this church, and I knew I couldn't do that. We actually went to another church just to be in a place where we could recover, and started to try and kind of piece together from a place of, absolute basic of, I believe in God, but I don't get this. And just the church really created a welcoming environment, very accepting, just for us to begin to start to process what the heck all that was about.
What some of the ways piecing together, what might that look like?
Well, I mean, a big thing that helped me in terms of the thing we talked about in terms of expectations was 2 years on from this, I got brought into a room by my boss along with all my colleagues, and we got told that all our jobs were being deleted, and that was a pretty big shock. And I prayed, and I said to God, "What's going to happen?" And I really felt that He spoke to me, and I felt that He said, "I will be with you." My gut reaction was, I wasn't very impressed. So I thought, is that the best you've got? I want to know if it's going to be okay. I want to know if I'm going to have a job. I want to know if I can pay the mortgage. But I felt that God said, I'll be with you. Over time, that made me think about my expectations and what was reasonable and what God promised. And I felt like I got to the place of thinking, God never promised life wouldn't be messy. But He promised that He would step into the mess with us. And that's my experience, which is He's faithful, and He was faithful in that job situation. And it doesn't mean everything's okay, and we're okay with everything that's happened. But I believe that that's God's promise to us, that He will be with us and that He will be faithful. And He's been faithful, and He's given us His Spirit to start to work through the pain. He's given us a community to stand with us, to work through what's happened.
You may have already touched on this then, but how is your relationship with God different to how it was before?
So I think the main thing is when I tell my story, people say the most helpful thing is how honest we are. So I think it's a lot more real, it's a lot more authentic. I accept there are things I don't understand. I think I have a more honest view of God, where before I would have said, because I am a Christian, I can know what will happen. So I went into that situation saying, because I'm a Christian, Ben will be healed. And nowadays, I think, because I'm a Christian, whatever happens, God will be with me. And I believe that's the promise, and that's a more reasonable and a more helpful place to work from.
So you're back doing a little bit of leadership, aren't you, within your church? Is it the church you moved to, or have you moved back?
So we're back at St Thomas and Crooks, and I lead what's called a cluster, which is 4 midweek groups.
That's in Sheffield?
Yeah.
Okay. How has the journey been for your wife compared to, how has it differed to you, and what are some of the things that you've learnt from her journey?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I'm an introvert, so I kind of think about things, and I've written a book because it helped me to write, and that's probably helped me to process my grief in a way that my wife would say she's not even sure that she's particularly started to do. And I think, we're called to stand alongside people. You will know people where stuff is going on, and the most important thing is to stand with them, and people will deal with things in different ways, but we need people just to help us along the way. So my wife would say in some ways she's barely started the process.
And as we always say, and because we got so many guys here, there will be people who have gone through, are going through, and are maybe worried about something similar to this or know someone, what would your main message be to the guys?
I think if people are struggling with something, if they've been knocked sideways or it's going on now, I really think God wants those people to know that he hasn't forgotten them. I think that's really important. I think for those of us in the church where we may see things that are going on, God calls us into community and to stand with people. After Ben died, there was just a vacuum in our life, and actually what we needed was mates. And it was a different set of people, actually, but he provided people just to be there for us, just to be mates. And I think sometimes in the church we slip into the idea that it's about us and God and working things out. And God calls us into community, to stand with people. And I think if people have struggled, sometimes you can withdraw, and God is calling maybe some people back into community, for him to help them work through their pain. And for the rest of us, we just need to make ourselves available to other people. It's not enough to say, I'll see you next Sunday. Yeah. Sometimes we've got to walk the journey with people, and we've got to share life together. Yeah.
And your older son Josiah is now 15.
Yep.
And how did he process things? How did he deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, Joe's he's like me. He's an introvert, and in some ways, what you do is you get on with things. And in a lot of ways, he's just got on with things. He's really into his music. I think that's a really good outlet for him. He'll talk about it, but he won't necessarily bring it up. So I think, again, for him, I suspect as he's older, some of this stuff is going to rise to the surface.
Yeah. Okay. So you talked about the book you've written, which is this one, What Happens Now? And there's a few copies available.
Copies on the stand, yeah.
At the CVM stand. And you're going to stick around afterwards, and you're there for people to come and chat to you. And you also have a website, don't you?
Yeah, so I've got a website, which is, if you put Dave Luck Writes into Google, you'll find that. And I'm blogging every week. And my heart is to talk about how faith relates to the life that we experience, to our culture, and to the day-to-day. And so in different ways, I'm just trying to open up, the relevance of faith, and the real stuff that is going on for life. So, yeah, that's going on as well.
Brilliant. Dave Luck. Thank you, mate.
Just listening to Dave there, and, I've known Dave's story really well and had the privilege of reading his book before he published it. But I'm just sitting there thinking, in this tent there are going to be guys who are processing stuff and maybe very historical grief, bereavement, wrestling with all kinds of questions. And the Lord brought to my mind, just as Dave was speaking, literally just then, just reminded me of the beautiful words in Psalm 139, Lord, you search me and you know me, you know when I sit down, when I rise up, you understand my thought from afar, you scrutinize my path and my lying down, and are intimately acquainted with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it. You've enclosed me behind and before, you've laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's too high, I can't attain to it. Then it says this, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in the depths, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the dawn, if I dwell in the remotest part of the sea, even there your hand will lead me and your right hand will lay hold of me. If I say, surely the darkness will overwhelm me and the light around me will be night, even the darkness is not dark to you, and the night is as bright as the day. Darkness and light are alike to you. There's nowhere you can go where God isn't present, even if you feel it. And I love what Dave said. Like, you don't understand everything, but God is there, even if you don't feel it.